political chaos, as you can imagine, has the country's tiny Christian community also on edge. Christians, mind you, make up about 10% of the population and have historically enjoyed a level of religious freedom. Here's a look at their role in Syrian society. Friday night in the old city of Damascus. It was a short distance from here that the Apostle Paul had his dramatic encounter with God and received his calling to spread the gospel. Today, Syrian Christians are continuing to follow in Paul's footsteps. This image of Christians sharing their faith in a Muslim-dominated country may come as a surprise to some. But the fact is that Christianity has had its roots in Syria since early in the 1st century. Following his conversion on the road to Damascus, Paul established the first organized Christian church at Antioch in ancient Syria. Meanwhile, John the Baptist's head is said to be located here at the Umayyad Mosque, which used to be a church at one time. And up the road from the Umayyad Mosque, you'll find the Chapel of Ananias. It is here, down in the cellar, where locals say the Lord used Ananias to cure Paul's blindness. This is the place where the Apostle Paul received his calling to share the gospel across the Roman world. Today, Christians have the freedom to worship openly here, and we are proclaiming the name of Jesus Christ everywhere in Syria. Christians make up 10% of the Syrian population. The majority are Muslims. Most of the Christians live in the cities of Damascus, Aleppo, Hama, and Latakia. The Orthodox and Catholic churches have the strongest following here. There are also half a dozen or so evangelical churches. Edward Awabde pastors one of those congregations on the west side of the capital.
Less than 1% of the population are the evangelicals in Syria. So we are a small minority.
But a minority that is seeing some growth. Ibrahim Samara pastors an evangelical church in the old city of Damascus.
The church today in Syria is living in its golden age. We see a hunger for God among the youth, and many families are expressing openness to the message of Christ. The church is also moving in freedom.
The Syrian constitution allows for freedom of religion. Although proselytizing is discouraged, the Christians we talk to say they've never had trouble sharing their faith with non-believers.
Obviously, we have to use some wisdom and discernment in how to best share Christ. We especially have to avoid talking negative about other religions.
In the meantime, one of the most effective tools of evangelism in Syria, and in fact throughout the Middle East, continues to be the showing of the Jesus film.
Over the years, we've had the chance to show the Jesus film in a number of cities across the country. And every time we show the film, 99% of those in attendance are non-Christians.
Today the gospel, which spread from here to the uttermost parts of the world, is making its way back to the region. And the Syrian Christians that CBN News talked to said the changes that are taking place across the Middle East are part of God's plan for the sake of the church here.
God is using these changes for the glory of His church. We believe that we are living in the end times and that Christ's return is very imminent. God is giving an opportunity for the people in the Middle East to turn to Him.
And these are truly historic times in that region. Joining us for some perspective is CBN senior editor John Wagi. He has spent several years in our Jerusalem bureau covering the events in the Middle East. What is it about Syria, John, that makes this place quite acceptable for evangelical Christians, perhaps unlike any other country in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq?
Well, I think part of it, George, is that Assad himself is from a minority in Syria, and so minorities get a little more protection. Also, his father, when he came to power in 1970, was a member of the secular Ba'ath Party, the same party that Saddam Hussein had founded in Iraq. And so Christians actually had a certain amount of, if not freedom, at least ability to carry out their faith within their own communities and everything under both of them. And so that I think is the primary reason. But I remember 5 years ago, you were in Syria, and you were really taken aback. I remember you being struck by what you saw in Damascus at the time.
Absolutely, because you know, in some ways, when I hit the streets of Damascus, you get this perspective of a very closed Islamic country, and it is quite the opposite. You have women who are wearing European outfits. They're not walking around with the hijab, and there is this openness. But I am concerned, as I'm sure you are. Our viewers watching this are concerned. The president is calling for Assad to step down. Who replaces him? And more importantly, what does it mean for the Christian community, as you mentioned, that has thrived under the Assad regime? Your thoughts?
Well, there were some problems for the Christians. I mean, Assad himself, there are reports that he shut down eight house churches among evangelicals last year, and probably continues to this day. So it isn't all roses for the Christians there. But no, there is uncertainty in the Christian community now in Syria about where it goes from here, because Syria is 90% Sunni, and if you look around at the so-called Arab Spring and who seems to be coming to the forefront, it's the Sunni Muslims. And just as in Iraq, where it's estimated that more than half the Iraqi Christians have left since the U.S. invaded and ousted Saddam, the same fate might await the Christians in Syria. And so it's a really difficult time, because Christians, as many other people in Syria, would like to see human rights come to the forefront. They'd like to see the end of the dictatorship, but what comes after it, that's a very important question for them.
And it is one that I'm sure that you will continue to watch for our viewers, a very, very important time in this strategic part of the world. John Wagi, as always, thank you, sir, for your insights.